Rowan. I must tell you all, I'm very excited to actually be here on this live online conversation. I want to begin by saying yesterday was a good day. I had some time to think about Black feminist epistemology and how, to a large extent, it has made an awful lot of positive things happen in the area that I work at Birkbeck, University of London. I want to point out that yesterday we had the first Black doctoral conference, which, from my point of view, took us a little bit further to seeing the power of Black feminist epistemology, something which I have seen grow and grow from the very beginning of the setting up of the Womanism Higher Education Research Network. So yesterday, Professor Jason Ade attended, spoke to us about the unique things that's happening. And why I say that this emerged out of the Womanism, Activism, Higher Education Research Network is to say that decolonising programs at Birkbeck has come of age. We have started to think about learning in womanist ways in terms of its practical application. Learning in womanist ways gives us an opportunity to think about those various areas of responsibility which an organization such as my own university has been trying to get to grips with. We've had so much time to think about anti-sexist work, so much time to do anti-racist work. And now we are on a different trajectory. I'd like to ask Rowan just to go to the second slide, the third slide. But the third slide takes us to decolonising the academy and some of the initiatives which we are doing on the margins. Whilst we are on the margins, we are at the centre of change. And by that, I mean, we are a collective at Birkbeck. And this collective basically takes us from across education platforms, across academic platforms, platforms where students are involved. So it is a project of the Research Centre for Social Change and Transformation in Higher Education. And emerging from a Black Women's Conference focused on Black British feminism, which took place in 2018, this created the energy for us to deal with what we see as something which is quite remarkable. Every single year, this collective, which is not part of the institution in the sense that it is not attached to any one committee. It is an informal collective that meets termly, that invites representatives, equality representatives across the university, across departments, across schools. And in this collective, myself and other colleagues have particular roles. And these roles include student experience, they include very much teaching and learning, they include research and resources. And we informally meet with across departments, across schools to discuss decolonising. From my point of view, my particular area, it is focused on Black feminist epistemology. So why? So in teaching and learning, I want to make it very clear that as far as the narratives, and let's face it, Black feminist theory is about going back to these narratives, getting others to think very carefully about the voice of Black women and the voice which takes on board the reason why Black feminist theory exists, the reason why there is this distinct and unique way to think about Black feminist theory, Black feminist politics. Um, Initially, class privilege in particular, we go back to class, it was not discussed by white women in the women's movement. There was this thinking at the time that a lot of our rejection of feminism, and this is rejection from Black feminists, I myself classify myself as a womanist, meaning that most of my responsibility I see for the wider community. Not to say that there are not these challenges inside the Black community. The fact that we are fighting sexism on a fairly large scale in particular sectors. But what I'm actually saying is that we are very much existing because of the actual issues in the wider community. So adopting a womanist agenda, a womanist lens, and basically every area of our work, we are speaking to white colleagues. We are reminding white colleagues of the nature of discrimination. And of course, the impact on Black men is something that concerns us. So the womanist agenda takes us much further to this notion of doing work, conducting research for the wider community. And I want to also note that in collaborating with colleagues within this collective, a lot of the thinking is very much around using reflexivity in the work that we do. So we're asking, in so many instances, we're asking individuals to find a place for Black feminist thought. And Black feminist thought, because of the nature of what we're doing, we are referring to the 4 tenets of Black feminist thought, and that is the ethic of care, that is personal accountability, that is examining in a lot of detail lived experience, and bearing in mind that lived experience is closely associated with dialogue as a means of assessing knowledge claims. We say that in this decolonising programs at our university, that we intend for every single department to adopt those 4 tenets of Black feminist thought in the day-to-day work that they do. And if I could move to the next slide, which is an image, current and ongoing practice inside the university. And so what we have been doing for the past 7 years is focusing very much on producing experiential workshops, working very closely with staff to consider conversational strategies in order to make things work. So rather than teaching from the front, we are looking backwards. We're looking behind. We're not looking at the front. We are actually asking tutors. We're asking staff. We're asking management at training sessions to think about the behind situation. So again, just yesterday, as it's sort of, so very recent, some of our speakers, some of our Black women conducting research using a Black feminist lens were able to focus very much on the fact that, these critical incidents which occur in the wider community is very much prevalent in our discussions, in our meeting rooms. And what we're finding that even on a subject of this type, that when we look behind the actual person who's actually delivering the actual lecture, we find issues of concern. And those issues of concern could be the fact that there may be just 2 Black men in a room of 100. We are it's obvious that we concern ourselves with why. And when the decolonizing agenda goes to work, it is getting us to consider why that is, not just that it is a conference for all Black and minority ethnic doctoral students, but why in this particular setting do we have such huge underrepresentation? And does this have to do with the topic, or does it have to do with the university structure, the university setup, which may well prevent the wider community from participating? So decolonizing for us is most certainly not about history per se. It is very much about knowing precisely what the history, the historical legacy, the most crucial part. But in this kind of contemporary settings, we've really got to concern ourselves with what is happening currently and move away from the fact that we have always done it that way. We've always thought about our teaching in this particular way. If I could move to the next slide, which is entitled Exploring the Tenets of Black Feminist Thought. Of course, we all know that students are indeed, the most valuable activists, from the involvement in the discourse, from the involvement in participative classes, or what we do in seminars, in production. We need to take account of the cultural production in relation to what learners are doing. A Black feminist lens encourages us to listen to the narratives of women. It encourages us to think very differently about how we present our teaching material, how we deal with a very typical Black feminist approach in writings, in songs, in performances, in artistic installations to protest. We already know that that will be hugely important to assisting us in delivering academic success. And one will argue that these differences, those things that Black feminist theory tells us it's important. We know that Black women are leaders in this area of narrative study, but to a large extent, our voices are often, very often, not heard. And then the issue of whether, in fact, the quality of our learning takes us to a different level, a level which may not be classified as knowledge. And I go back to Patricia Hill Collins' views that when we are working with students, we still need to think about knowledge and the fact that we are going to achieve or acquire knowledge, not necessarily from the high flyers, not necessarily from the academics, but women who may be working on the front line, women out there who are interested in telling their stories in a particular way. And the more Black tutors we encourage to join the establishment, to grow in professorships, the more we are able to assist in developing and dealing with something as critical as that awarding gap, that kind of difference, that kind of state that we're actually in, an ethic of care, an ability to look at personal accountability, an ability to concern ourselves with a different type of narrative, a different type of dialogue, will assist us in grappling with the fact that at the end of the day, we are still considered not achieving in the same way compared to our white counterparts. So the decolonizing approaches that Black feminist epistemology allows us to engage with, we've already seen the difference that this is making inside higher education. I'm very much involved in a particular program, which is Education, Power and Social Change, which gives us an opportunity to think differently about education, but also provide us with the tools, again, using the Black feminist lens. We're able to work very closely with our learners to be able to find ourselves moving students smoothly from undergraduate to postgraduate study. Notable Black women were among this particular progressive way of working, and I want to just share with you in my own publication, Communities of Activism, what we're seeing is that some of the strategies detailed here gives us an insight into how Black women are able to assist others in thinking differently about what is considered to be knowledge, what is considered to be good academic writing. And it is only through these lenses that we are able to discuss with others, think about the hierarchy of learning, think also about the hierarchy of teaching. And in a very practical way, those particular perhaps ways of thinking will assist us in moving forward. Now, once again, we have found ourselves in the last few years, I would say, at a situation where we have we've passed all our expectations with regards to individuals, mature students, younger students wanting to engage with Black feminist epistemology post George Floyd. Here we have three things to think about. One, the fact that older women were particularly moved in a particular way to get involved in the struggle. Young people were finding that their learning was beginning to take a different way, there were different reasons for actually learning. And that kind of energy we have seen reflected in course numbers. Once again, yesterday, food for thought. Why is it? Why was it that we have seen increasing numbers of Black women wanting to use Black feminist epistemology to conduct research? And I would say to you that it is the issues, whilst we have not been in a position to question so much of what had gone on in the past and think about the death of Cherry Gross, the death of Cynthia Jarrett, the death of Joy Gardner. In all these situations in this country, most of our lives, we have been afraid, to a large extent, to discuss institutional racism and identify murder, racist murders, as the results of long and hard, perhaps fights that have come to us, that we as tutors, as lecturers in higher education, have found ourselves with no way of actually judging what our contribution could be in these arenas, our contributions inside higher education. And what we're finding now is that whilst Black feminist epistemology has been such an American agenda, through this particular lens, we're finding our voice. We're assisting students in finding their voice. We are actually finding a space where we can all collectively appreciate our responsibility through our own personal accountability. And again, it's how Black women have found themselves at this particular level. And, we still acknowledge that unless Black women are free, nobody else to take this mantra forward. So from that point of view, I want to say that today we are finding a different way of seeing the decolonizing agenda as working in a very sort of meaningful way, in a practical way. We're seeing the possibilities. In a practical way, we're appreciating where we're actually at and what we need to do. And the next slide is also a photograph, and it is around experiential workshop and adopting a non-binary academic approach to everything that we do. And in doing that, no longer are we putting center stage the lectures, no longer are we putting to a large extent center stage the sorts of seminars, but what we are doing, we are working very closely in group activities, in conversations, in looking from the back of the classroom to be able to get a sense of people's lived experience, to get a sense of what it is that individuals are doing in the community, how they are contributing. And what we're finding is that, this again is giving us food for thought. We're not going back to just accepting that when we produce our materials, we're going to run with it in the very same way. Learning outcomes, of course, is crucial, very important to us. And those particular approaches, which give some kind of responsibility to individuals, whether individuals are Black, whether they're white, whatever minority ethnic group, Black feminists thought, Patricia Hills Collins, essential tenets of Black feminist epistemology gives us room for thought. And just to say that every single year since 2018, we have taken time to think very realistically about what we see in terms of community. And for that reason, every single year, we work very closely with activists in the community, people working on the old frontline housing estates, Black women who are involved in collective projects which have a sense of ownership, projects designed, very much to deal with the old widening participation agenda. With a decolonizing lens, a decolonizing approach, we are going out there and concerning ourselves with contemporary womanist ways of thinking. So how might we shape what we do in our research design, for example? How might we support a focus on Black studies? In addition to that, what we do, we collaborate with others across the university sector. We collaborate with individuals who are, finding the issue of decolonizing being very much the buzzword. Yes, it is, very much, is it a reality? Are we just transferring some of our diversity and inclusion projects and putting a different title on it. What we find is that when we are engaged with looking and thinking about the voice of the Black woman, it gives us an all-round approach to look much deeper, to make what we do sustainable for the long run. And at the heart of this, I cannot deny that having Black staff with a particular type of lived experience is not helpful in all of this. We cannot, we can think very carefully about what staff in the main may assist us with, but we still go back to the thinking of role modeling. We still go back to actually seeing faces involved very much in the execution and the delivery of learning in higher education. So these particular events, this particular way of looking at how we deal with an issue, such as underrepresentation, these annual conferences together with those termly decolonizing approaches in particular areas, gives us an opportunity to say that this is here for some time. We don't have to rely on a particular department deciding to ditch it, yes, to put it aside. We are there in the center. We have been working very closely with an American supporter, an individual who has written extensively on Black feminist epistemology, has been involved in the work that we're doing, the autoethnographic work. And the reason for that is because many of the projects that we are involved in involves this Black feminist way of thinking. That's all we are doing is voicing our lives in a particular way. Our lives and voicing our lives, which in this country, in a sort of British context, has been very sort of, very little heard. Of course, the groundbreaking work of Stella Dadsey, Beverly Bryan, Susan Scaife, has given us a platform. From 1985. We have, I would say, perhaps 2 generations sitting with us who are learning for the very first time about what the heart of the race meant at the particular time it emerged. And so in a way, what we're saying, so much of the literature on Black feminist epistemology is there not still fully accessible in a way which supports the practical application of our work here in this country. But we need to, in this continent, we need to take account of the work of the Womanism Higher Education Research Network, which again is taking us a very internationally focused opportunity with women from South Africa, from America, women who are actively working in this area. But the strongest part of our work in very recent times has been the work conducted by Tanya Burkhardt as a member of that research network, and somebody who is very much in that vein of the summer of racial reckoning, taking us to another level in relation to the sensitivity that we need to be adopting in our activities, particularly our activities with these mental scarring, the ability to think very much about the experience faced by our students those who are so very close to some of those wider critical issues, such as knife crime, those who are predominantly the first point of contact with individuals who are out of education to a large extent, but individuals who are most definitely feeling the pain of those very serious critical incidents in their own communities. And I also want to point out that in this decolonising vein, members of the Birkbeck Decolonising the Academy Collective includes the very senior members of the library. So Elizabeth Charles, the Assistant Programme Director, has spent her time working with us and decolonising our library, not just with the inclusion of new publications, but most definitely involving herself with practical classes to actually demonstrate what it means to decolonize curriculums across departments. And of course, without a doubt, intersectionality, forms the major part of what we do. So intersectionality methodology workshops run by the Womanism Higher Education Research Network gives opportunities for everybody at our university to address those wider intersecting issues, whether they are class, whether they are issues which involved everybody. Yes, it is not just, the fact that you're not a Black woman, you have nothing to do with Black feminist epistemology. It is very much that you are part of this kind of knowledge of understanding about those different, forms of oppression. So we have time to concern ourselves with queer theory. We have time to look at what it means for the writings of Judith Butler to sit alongside Black feminist writing in order to get a sense of where Black women fit, where they are, the kinds of experience that they face. And it is not disingenuous to actually say that, that once we begin to concern ourselves with what else, who kind of feels a particular type of oppression, sometimes Black women are best placed to find themselves with a range of oppression to consider, and to consider how that fits into the institutional, how the institution deals with and supports this, whether this is through, again, developing collaborative work with others in the particular field. And experiential workshops are regularly developed across both masters and undergraduate programs. And we invite others from outside the university to come in to assist us in particular scenarios where we embed these scenarios in our courses. So halfway after reading week, halfway through an 11-week course, we conduct those very experiential type workshops where there are particular scenarios, issues such as an issue, the impact of the Grenfell fire on individuals in the locality. So these experts are able to support the way that we think about what has happened in the lives of particular communities. And the way the Black feminist thought comes in, it's once again addressing the issue of the lived experience, the personal accountability, the ethic of care, and the fact that we have that opportunity through dialogue and using that to assess knowledge claims. And so this is a theme which runs through all these challenging workshops, but one which assists us in getting the university involved in this focus in the practical ways that decolonizing can be addressed. And I just want to take just a couple more. And the first one, of course, is my own publication, Learning in Women's Ways, which in a very conversational way, something which Black feminist writing gives us, time to hear those raw, unedited voices of different groups of women coming to the agenda and telling us what it means to be learning in this contemporary society. And the learning, again, is replicated through those individuals who are taking up the themes in this widening participation publication. And it's always important to acknowledge that throughout all of this, the intergenerational approach is something which is going to become increasingly challenging, most definitely for me, as I work at an institution which is more and more finding itself working with younger students. And still a fairly new thing, UCAS, full-time, from moving from almost totally full evening institution to an institution which is thriving with a growing undergraduate full-time, daytime public participation from younger students. And so we are involving younger students they are involving themselves in this decolonizing agenda. And I think it's important, for us to think about what that means in this particular climate and how we learn so much. COVID-19 assisted us in realizing the need to much more involve the elements which traditionally it would be considered radical elements of the trade union movement, involving students, getting students involved in much more than roads must fall, getting students involved in much more than things which are traditionally considered decolonizing, but getting students involved in this mainstream way of thinking. And this is once again because of the way that the tenets of Black feminist epistemology assist in that development. And so what I'd like to do just for now, I'd like to have time with the audience, and then I will come back to giving some insights into my own work and how that is increasingly closely mirroring the ethic of care, which is going to be more important in a decolonizing higher education academy. So I'd like to open up now for some questions. Okay, brilliant. Okay, well, hello everybody. It's wonderful to see you all. How many have we got? Let's see. Okay, it's wonderful to see you all. And so, just a question perhaps. May I ask maybe a show of hands to know how many of you are teaching? How many of you are teaching? Hands up. Okay, all right. Okay, 3 of you. Great. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Now, would anybody like to make a comment or question?
Yeah, so we've got a hand up from a Lena El Hakim, who has also posted a comment in the chat. Lena,
Okay.
it's up to you if you'd like to unmute and sort of put those things across yourself, or if you'd like me to just read them out from the chat, I'm happy to do that as well.
Hi, thanks, Rowan, and thanks so much, Jan. I'm happy to have my voice on. I'm really interested in this idea of ways of learning. So learning in womanist ways, teaching in womanist ways, sharing in particular ways. And I've been feeling in my teaching, in my learning, that this seems to be the trick. So it's something in the way of, rather than in a content itself, or in the themes, or even in the subject matter. And I was wondering how you would qualify what a womanist way of doing things is in terms of pedagogic practice almost. So what, or is it more strategies rather than ways of? I mean, is it more gestures, or is it an attitude, or?
Yes. Your name again?
Lena.
Lena. Lena, that's such an interesting question. It's so helpful to have it. Just to share with you, yesterday I was, not yesterday, the day before yesterday, I was at the University of Birmingham, just around the corner from you guys. And there was an issue which was raised, very similar to this, which made me think about the fact that when we present as teachers, we are very much involved in putting those things, the traditional way of thinking. We've got to give that content. That content comes from us. It always, in the main, there is a part of our agenda that it comes from us. Now, if we put it the other way, and learning in womanist ways begins with us preparing the students to give us the information as they see it. We begin with their thoughts. And the reason why we do this, it's because not all the time, we've got to take a range of different ways that students learn into account. But at the same time, if we think about the practical way, a learning in womanist ways puts us more so at the back. And, we get the students to tell us what their agenda is in a given situation. So if I tell you that I teach one module on class, and of course, we have our traditional ways of actually dealing with that module. And in order to give that understanding, we need to begin by giving students an idea as to what we mean. So I would start with a reading from bell hooks. But what I would not do, I would not give in at the start, from the outset, with this view that this is what has been happening, with regards to the issue of class. I would ask the student to tell me their lived experience of class. Now, it could be that what we say is that this is not the way to think about class. I think that is wrong. I think we need to, shape We need to lead from the back. So get the students to tell us what it is, how they see it, and then deal with it in another way. We know that there'll be many critiques of decolonizing approaches. Melanie Phillips, for example, will say, you know, this is not the way to do it. This is, you know, we need to, you know, think about perhaps the founding fathers, and, you know, regardless of whether, you know, we traditionally adopt a Marxist approach to teaching class. You know, we know that today there are different ways. So learning in womanist ways gets us also to think about those psychosocial approaches to delivering our classes. It gets us also to think about, you know, all our own teaching, our own ways, the way we have been taught to teach. We need to not necessarily abolish it, but do it differently because we're thinking differently about participants. And finally, it's not to say that the learning outcomes, they don't need to change. The way we mark students' work, we take account of so much of that. But learning in womanist ways gives us an opportunity to think differently about experience, about the way we listen. We think differently about how, you know, we, you know, help support students in their care for the wider issues. So I hope this helps. I hope, yes?
It does very much. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I don't want to hug the mic. I'm not working on the theory, but I'm certainly looking at ways of implementing the practices, this idea of sharing experience in the classroom and then thinking through things together. So you've got the text as references, and you've got the theory as references, and you've got the history. And it's about bringing in our experiences, their experiences, and I guess working through it together. I mean, that's what makes the classroom so exciting, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Rowan, is there a question in the box?
From a Lorraine Jones, who said, "Thank you, Jen, for your great presentation. Always so good to hear you. Do you think our work should be decolonial or anti-colonial?"
Okay. I wonder if this is the Lorraine Jones that I know. I wonder. Okay. Yes, I think it most definitely should be decolonial. It is kind of, yes, it's very interesting because anti-colonial, I often think about, you know, whether, you know, there are lots of, because there's so many challenges around. Sometimes anti-colonial takes us away from, it kind of separates us an awful lot. It's sort of the them and us situation. Decolonial, I think, you know, brings it so much closer together. I think, you know, I'm somebody who comes from years of working in anti-racist work. So I'm an individual who, you know, in the early days of race relations, race awareness training, it was something which were in some quarters frowned upon. And it was, you know, the memory, and in some instances, the hurt, you know, on both sides, both trainer and learner, during that time, resonates. It resonates anti-colonial sort of in this climate, you know, resonates differently. So I think with decolonial, it means that, you know, we are all involved, you know, we are finding ways, different ways of doing things. And I hope you can hear me there. We take time to think about our practices. It's much sort of wider than conducting training, specific training. So I'm happy to run with that. May I ask you, Lorraine, perhaps the genesis of your question? That would help.
Hi, Jan. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. And I recognize the voice now. Yes.
It is me. Sorry, I've got no camera. I've got no camera.
Okay.
Yeah, the reason why I say that is that in my working practice, I'm not in the business of teaching right now, but I am in the business of education. That's what I say. I'm not actually teaching students in my role that I'm in at the moment. I work in a predominantly white institution, as we all do, and there's such a resistance to decolonisation. There's much more of an appetite for Athena Swan, anything to do with gender, but race has gone off the agenda once again. It came back on in 2020, and in my opinion, it's really gone back off again. We could be saying George Who 4 years later. And I was just wondering, the anti-colonial as opposed to decolonial, with the Audre Lorde, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. There's just talk around while you're there, go for the anti-colonial as opposed to the decolonial. So it was just, I was just interested in your point that there's such a resistance anyway, I feel, in my experience, for people to decolonize anyway. I think a lot of white academics, lecturers, or involved in the education business find it very, very difficult to address colonization and the fact that academia is steeped in it. And I think there's a lot of white fragility around it. And I think some of that is about people not feeling able to. I think some academics, and this is what they've expressed to me, feel unable to, as a white academic, be able to stand in the classroom and teach from their own lived experience because they are white. And so I think people disengage from it. And I was just wondering if you thought, rather than decolonize, using Audre Lorde's term, whether we should, like Kahindi Andrews says, go for the revolution whilst you're there. Just be anti-colonial. Yeah. No, I loved what you had to say, as always. I'm a womanist as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And this is just a good example, I would say, of the kind of tensions across the university, the higher education sector, because it is, and this is why it's so important, and what Birmingham City are doing together with De Montfort. And, I would love to see these collaborations with more than 2 universities, because there is something to be said about, these voices, the different ways that we understand things. When I go across to different universities, I learn so much about how individuals see things. And I think it is always good to continue the conversations across the sector. It is, very interesting also that, at my own space, SOAS, we work very closely with SOAS on some things, but not so closely on others. And I think, this challenge to do the right things, and, we know the neoliberal sort of way of thinking at this stage, it means that, we are, wanting to do our own thing, wanting to be very competitive about what we do. Sometimes, this kind of class structure which exists, prevents the universities from really, really listening and doing something, which is going to make a difference. We might collaborate for a little while, and then, what I find, that we will go off and do something completely different. And so, I see, examples. I don't want to, sort of labor the point, but I feel that, the agenda, it is up to us, some of us, outside of that formal structure, when we are, working with people outside the university. It is for us to sort of keep up the momentum. It is for us, to work hard to make sure that it does not get off the agenda. And I can tell you that, from where I'm sitting, I can see that it is still very much on the agenda in many places. But I really feel that we have to let others into our spaces to be able to really, flourish, because we know what the end game is. We know what it is that we want to achieve. All the things that were not around before, we wanting to see change, and gradually change happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Jem.
Oh, thank you, Lorraine.
A question in the chat from Anna Laura. They say, thank you. I find the classroom examples very useful to think through teaching and learning otherwise. Are there particular resources you could point toward for finding examples of good practice?
Okay. You see, it's interesting because, oh, sorry, who asked that question?
That question was asked by an Anna Laura Alifuoco. Forgive my
Okay,
pronunciation.
yeah. Okay. Anna Laura, thank you very much. Thank you for that question. I think we are still sort of, I would say, early days from really getting a text which actually gives those practicalities. I have a publication which is coming out in the next 2 months. It's actually a text which is around, doing just that. But of course, it is from that feminist lens. It is approaches to decolonising the academy. And again, what I have done, I have managed to get a number of commentators, teachers, both black and white, to put their own practical experiences of doing what they do in decolonising the academy. So it is Decolonising the Academy, a feminist approach, and it is by lived places. It's coming out in the next couple of months. In terms of what else is available, of course, there are publications which deal with the sort of, I would say, the historical sort of legacy of this type of work. So here at my own university, we have some modules which are around decolonising the curriculum. And they're modules in areas such as history. And history has perhaps a very good reputation of, producing publications, which gives insights. But once again, these insights are not contemporary, but they are by individuals who are teaching subjects and incorporating their practice into their research. We also have in the very same university, we have individuals working in the Department of Geography who once again focused on how they are dealing with decolonising, but not from a human geography point of view. So I would say for now, these particular publications are around, of course, on decolonising, but with regards to the practicalities of that, it is only emerging. So I would say to you, just watch out for this space. Yeah, watch this space. I'd like to, really flag up this thing about why we are doing what we're doing in this arena. And if you were to go back to your institutions, there are, questions, still sort of out there with regards to the progress that we are making around diversity, around the sorts of things, for example, the discussion which is being had around belonging, replacing a lot of our strategies, in thinking about critical race theory and where there is room to adopt decolonizing principles, I would say that it is still a question of leadership. It is still a question of who the organization chooses to bring in to assist in making change. Those leaders are still very much not using a particular lens which will really assist in addressing, if we are replacing, for example, critical race theory approaches with a way of thinking about individuals and belonging, then it really means that what we're seeing is that one university moves from one thing to another, but the reality is still the same. And what I mean by that is the reality of the actual progress, the levels of achievement, the focus is still very much the same. It is still very much owned by the establishment. So what we need to be doing, I would say, is concerning ourselves with those principles that I have, wanted, us to think very carefully about, working closely with individuals. It's not just a Black agenda. It is, what we are suggesting, in the way of practicalities and getting others to see. Because the minute, you adopt a situation where we are all sitting on the same platforms, we are all putting our particular views across in a particular way. We're getting others, we're having the conversations with others. It is only in that way that change can occur. And yes, I have been at my own organization for more than 20 years, and I have seen what it means for that small amount of change to take place. It is very much about, being on the outside a lot, on the inside a little bit, but working with others. And putting an agenda which was always an agenda which did not sit comfortably with the organization, but an agenda which basically said, you want to show that you are dynamic. The only way you can show that you are dynamic is by, making certain that we are there, that we have that opportunity to talk your talk. We have that opportunity to engage with our learners. Our numbers may rise, with regards to individuals moving from one stage to the highest level of education, formal education that is, but at the same time, we will not go away. So it needs a particular type of activism to be able to gradually convince the institutions, those who are making the institution, what it is. That is the only way, I think, we can change. And this is not just about being a thorn in the side of the institution, but this is really a way of navigating our sort of approaches. And what we have found, what certainly in my own quarter has found, that this Black feminist way of thinking constantly is beginning to get through. Okay. Rowan?
Yeah, another question in the chat from Lena. Thank you, Jan. Could you also elaborate a bit more on the work we do or should do outside the classroom, in communities and perhaps also in relation to wider politics, especially if we think of what's happening now?
Yes. Again, this is a very, is it Anita? Sorry, what's your name? Remind me the name.
It's from Lena El Hakim.
Oh, Lena, okay. Hi. Yes, and this is exactly what I was just thinking about in my last contribution, because it cannot happen just inside an organization where students have said, well, why isn't my, it's really, why is my professor not Black? And it is, I have to also say to you all that this agenda, of course, is not just about Blackness. This agenda takes us closer to involving everybody, okay? To involving all the sort of, we think about well-being issues, not just being about one area, but it's about others. So we cannot work without including these projects, these organizations that are out there working on things. We cannot take politics out of our work. We cannot disassociate ourselves with the issues which are out there. So I would say we need to continue including those things that they make it sometimes difficult. And when I say they, senior management may decide that it is no longer a good thing. Financially, we cannot involve guest lecturing on our courses. And this is one of the, one of the most difficult, annoying, type issues preventing, particular courses from, really thriving and sort of moving forward in making an enlightened decolonizing the academy sort of ethos, because of the fact that one time, if I give you an example, we had an individual by the name of Paul Hoggett, my former supervisor at Bristol. Every year, he assisted us in dealing with, some of those case studies which were very much about well-being. Why it is that the rising numbers of schizophrenia among Black men continues to rise, and what health authorities, what others, what the community could be doing. Within a few months, this type of operation was slashed. And this is because of funding, because of the fact that, there were things that we didn't do because we were no longer able to do it. But I would say, this is what we need to fight for. We need to concern ourselves with, how we can move away from an organization which is still so white male dominated, in particular teaching areas, to open things out, to work with others, to deal with the insightful way that this business about, lived experience in particular corners, who can give us food for thought in terms of considering our personal accountability in all of this. We need to see a lot more of it. We need to find ways of bringing in people from the outside to assist us in delivering our curriculums. I think all of us, those of us who are teaching, will, find ways of bringing in those appropriate, those relevant publications. I don't think that has ever been a particular problem in particular corners. But the more we give these fine examples, other areas, other disciplines will follow. I remember inside the ivory tower, we had, this very sort of wonderful way of thinking about inclusion, getting others from outside who may be in sports development, who may well be in biochemistry, all those wonderful individuals. Marcia Wilson spoke, wrote about her experience inside the ivory tower. And that in itself, again, gave us, time to think about how our learners, how they are able to associate themselves, with the sorts of concerns. But what it is, this also assists us in bringing those voices out, getting individuals to speak, getting individuals to make suggestions, getting individuals more so to assist with developing the curriculum, and also, learning so much about what could be, what should be done better. I cannot see higher education continuing with a decolonizing program without that outside involvement. And this is what we push for on our Womanism, Activism, Higher Education Research Network. Thank you. Yes. Is that a hands up I can see? HQ?
Hi there, my name's Hina.
Hi.
I just wanted to say that first of all, thank you very much to you and also for everyone else for their contributions. I think for me personally, I've been feeling very discouraged recently, and that but a lot of your comments today have helped me feel a bit more motivated. My biggest discouragement really has been from the more I'm trying to educate myself and take part in and read more Black feminist epistemologies and readings, and I try apply that in the work that I work in. So I work in EDI within student and education work, and I have recently felt quite discouraged in that there's only the progress that we make. And you hit on a point that I think put together what my feelings were really was that a lot of the times working within institutions that are Eurocentric, that white centre, it's the terminologies end up changing and become sanitized. So it often feels like any work or any progress we're making forward gets kind of quelled down by rebranding it into something else and sanitizing it in a way that suits the institution. So from the movement from assimilation to then becoming multiculturalism, and I feel that sometimes with the push for belonging, is that how much is that a push to for the students, and how much that is that to assimilate students to the institutions. And but sorry, so I'm not explaining well, but I just wanted to say that everybody's comments here today and yourself as well have made me feel a bit more encouraged. That the agenda, as long as we all understand what the agenda is and we always push for the agenda, we may not be getting the big wins that we want every single time, but it's a movement forward, and any progress is progress. And when we look back and we see that actually we are able to discuss decolonial work and not be silenced in those conversations. Yes, the pendulum shifts a lot, where now that we can't really, we are discouraged from discussing decolonial work. We use more sanitized language, like inclusive projects and inclusive learning. But the work, if we understand what that work is, we can still keep pushing that. And so I just want to say thank you to everyone. Sorry, that was a bit much, but thank you.
Thank you very much. That made an awful lot of sense. Yeah, so it really is onwards, forwards, upwards. It really is time for us to consider collaboration. The agenda must remain. Thank you all very much for your participation. Your comments, most welcome. My email address is in the chat, I think, or Rowan will put it in for me. Feel free to contact me again so that, we can get you to fully appreciate how Black feminist epistemology can be successfully part of this program. Thank you.